Paka jolted awake, his chest heaving as the dream of Naraka, the lion god, lingered in his mind.
You must stop what you are doing, Paka, son of the lion, or you will destroy us all.
The image wouldn't leave him. He sat up, running a hand over his face. The hut was quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of Akina and Chipo, who had fallen asleep despite their fear of him. They had fought to stay awake the previous night, determined not to let their guard down, but exhaustion had won. Paka understood. He was a stranger to them, but they would have to grow accustomed to his presence because he was here to stay. The door creaked open as Paka stepped into the cool morning breeze. Suddenly, a familiar smell caught his attention, something distinct, deeply ingrained in his memories. It was the scent of Shumba, his father, and Mhuka, his trusted advisor. Paka's heart beat faster as he scanned the surroundings, trying to discern whether his senses were playing tricks on him. "Show yourselves!" he shouted. Then, from the shadows of the forest, two figures emerged, his father and Mhuka. The sight of his father was both disarming and angering. "Father, what are you doing here?" Paka asked, his voice full of both surprise and suspicion. "I'm here to take you home, my son," Shumba replied. "I have been sent by Naraka himself to bring you back home." Paka shook his head. "I'm not going back," he said firmly. "I told Naraka this is my path now. I can't abandon it. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story." Shumba's eyes narrowed. "Paka, you have always been my most stubborn child, but this is too much. You would sacrifice the lives of your people for what? A chance at glory, personal glory." "Father, this is not about personal glory," Paka shot back, his voice filled with both passion and frustration. "This is about proving that we are a great people, that we do not deserve to live hidden in the shadows of the forest. We have strength, power, and ambition, yet we cower away from the world. I cannot accept that fate." Shumba sighed deeply. "We are not like others, Paka. We are a family bound by a pact with the gods themselves. We were never meant to interfere with human affairs." "And why not?" Paka demanded, his eyes blazing. "What makes us so different from the hunters or the snake people? They integrate themselves into human society, taking positions of power. Are they not gods among men as we are? So why do we remain hidden, wasting away in the forest? Is that what you call a legacy?" Mhuka, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his voice measured but firm. "Paka, you know the circumstances of our creation were different. You know our history. We are different, but that difference binds us to a responsibility, a promise we made to the gods. If we break that promise, we risk more than just our lives. We risk the very balance of the world." Shumba shook his head, frustrated. "You're blinded, Paka. You've lost your way. This isn't your path. It's a delusion." Paka's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "A delusion?" he repeated. "No, father. This is clarity. For the first time, I see everything." Shumba's eyes narrowed. "You're not listening, son. This isn't about destiny. This is about pride. You've forced yourself into a life that doesn't belong to you. Look at this place. These people don't want you here. You're holding them hostage, pretending they're something they're not." "They are mine," Paka growled, his voice rising. "Akina is my wife. Chipo is my daughter. This is my family now, father, whether they know it yet or not." Shumba's face hardened, his voice firm. "Then you leave me no choice." Inside the hut, Akina and Chipo stirred, hearing the heated exchange outside. The low growls and raised voices sent a chill through them. "What should we do, mother?" Chipo whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Akina hesitated. "We wait," she said softly, though her heart raced with fear. "Mother," whispered Chipo, her voice trembling, "what good is it to sit here and wait for Paka to come back and finish us? We should make a run for it. We should get help. We can't just sit here and let him decide our fate. Who knows who he's talking to out there? What if they're like him? What will become of us, mother?" Akina sighed, her body still hurting but much better thanks to Zuberi's remedies. Before she could respond, Chipo continued, "Mother, you're not well. Let me go. I'll find help. "And I'll come back for you," Chipo said, her voice soft but steady. Her resolve reminded Akina so much of her father, Jabali. Chipo was just like him, always on the move, always finding solutions, always making a plan. Where was Jabali when he was needed the most? He should have been back by now. Akina smiled weakly and nodded, though her body still ached when she moved. Running wasn't an option for her. "Okay, Chipo," she said. "Please be careful, my daughter." Chipo knelt down, clasped her mother's hand briefly, and offered a reassuring smile. "I will, Mother. Don't worry," she said before standing. Akina watched as her daughter turned toward the door. The door was slightly ajar, and Chipo froze, listening intently. Outside, she could hear the low rumble of voices, deep and fiery in tone. Peering through the crack, she saw 3 figures standing just beyond the hut. Paka was there, locked in what seemed to be an intense conversation with the other 2 men. Their focus was so absorbed in their argument that they didn't notice her. Chipo's heart raced as she slipped out silently, her bare feet treading softly on the dirt. She kept low and moved quickly in the opposite direction, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. All she could think about was getting to the next homestead and asking for help. The village has to know that Paka the lion was back. They need to know what's happening, she thought, pushing herself to run faster. She knew the path well. It was one she had taken many times before, but this time was different. This time the stakes were higher than ever. As the first signs of the next homestead came into view, a plume of smoke rising from a distant chimney, Chipo allowed herself a fleeting moment of relief. But she knew she wasn't safe yet. She had to move faster, had to reach them before anyone from Paka's side realized she was gone. The river was calm, and Kitapo, now breathing steadily, lay in her bed, her chest rising and falling as she rested. She had been through a lot, and it was clear she needed time to recover. Mwamba turned to Niala. "Thank you, Niala, for everything," he said softly. "But there was something you wanted to tell me before we rushed into this. What was it?" Niala nodded. "Yes, Mwamba. There's something important. The village had a request. The chief and the elders came to me together, asking me to lift the curse." Mwamba raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them I needed 3 days to think about it," Niala replied, her voice quivering slightly. "I said I'd return with a decision." Mwamba studied her closely. "And what is your heart telling you?" he asked gently. Niala sighed, her eyes clouded with emotion. "You should have seen them, Mwamba. The way they looked." She paused, struggling to find the words. The chief himself, he was so different, so broken. I hardly recognized him at first. The villagers, Mamma Mia, all of them. They looked like they had been through so much. Maybe the punishment I gave them was too harsh. Mwamba listened quietly, allowing her to pour out her thoughts. "Do you think it's time I give them back the village?" Mwamba looked at her carefully. "Do you have any hopes of going back and joining the village?" he asked. "Because I know being united with them has been a lifelong dream of yours." "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "I've made a home for myself here." Mwamba smiled faintly. "Very well then. There is your answer." Niala let out a soft sigh of relief, her lips curling into a small smile. "Thank you, Mwamba. You're always a sounding board for me, a voice of reason." The answer was already within my grasp. They both smiled, and a faint chuckle passed between them, easing the tension. "I might need your help soon," Niala added after a moment, her tone growing serious again. "We both know that a curse is far harder to banish than to cast." Mwamba nodded. "Let me know when you're ready, and I'll be there." Niala stepped out of the river, prepared to face the day ahead. Today she would meet with the elders and deliver her final answer. Even so, doubts lingered. Could she ever truly forgive the village for their past betrayal and rejection? Could she truly forgive them? Whatever final decision she made would define not just her relationship with the village, but also her future. Lulenga walked with purpose, his stride intentional. Jabali had left his homestead, and Lulenga hoped he had not yet returned. Perhaps whatever business had taken him away would keep him occupied for a few more days. All Lulenga wanted was to see Akina, just to make sure she was safe. Kitapo had survived the worst, and her recovery was a blessing from the gods. As he approached the path, his sharp eyes caught sight of a figure running in the opposite direction. It was Chipo, her movements frantic. She was about to take another path that led to a neighboring homestead when she spotted him. Her wide eyes filled with recognition and urgency, and she waved her arms frantically. "Sir! Sir, help!" she shouted, her voice trembling with desperation. Lulenga froze. This was not how he imagined things would unfold. The sight of Chipo's distress struck fear in his heart. What if something had happened to Akina? He quickened his pace, meeting Chipo halfway. She stopped in her tracks, her breath ragged, and for a moment her shock overtook her. She couldn't believe it was him again, this man who seemed to appear at the strangest times. Gathering her courage, she gasped, "My mother! She's being held hostage by a man, a dangerous man. Please, sir, help us." Lulenga needed no further explanation. Without hesitation, he ran in the direction Chipo pointed, his heart thundering in his chest. The danger, the odds, none of it mattered. All that consumed him was the thought of saving Akina. Chipo, meanwhile, continued on her way, determined to rally the neighboring villagers to come to their aid. When Lulenga arrived at Jabali's homestead, he stopped dead in his tracks. The sight before him was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. 3 men, each with a lion's mane framing their faces, circled each other with an intensity that crackled in the air. Lulenga recognized one of them instantly. He had seen his likeness before, the man in the shadows that day, silently watching Jabali and Chipo. Lulenga's grip tightened on his trident, the weapon humming with power as it fully transformed in his hands. The 3 men stopped their argument at the sight of him, their expressions shifting from anger to shock. They were not expecting to see him, the king of the merfolk. Shumba spoke first, his deep voice calm but commanding. "We mean no harm, King Lulenga. This is merely a family matter, an argument among kin." Lulenga's eyes sharpened. "And you choose to have this argument on the doorstep of Jabali, the chief of this village, without his presence? Why not have this discussion deep in the forest where you reside?" Shumba's golden eyes studied him with curiosity and respect. "I could say the same of you, King of the Merfolk. You are a long way from your river and your kingdom. And you, King Shumba of the Lion People," Lulenga replied with a faint smile, "are a long way from your forest." For a tense moment, the 2 kings stood in silence, their mutual respect evident. They both knew that raising a hand against each other would spell war, one that neither of them wanted to fight. Finally, Shumba spoke, his tone conciliatory. "Very well, my friend. Your point is valid. This discussion is better suited for the depths of the forest. We must bid you farewell." Shumba and his companions bowed their heads respectfully, and Lulenga returned the gesture. As the 3 men departed, Paka's irritation grew with every step. He gritted his teeth, fuming at what he saw as cowardice. "We should have attacked. The war could have begun today," he thought bitterly. Lulenga watched them disappear into the forest before the sound of distant voices caught his attention. Turning, he saw a crowd approaching, the villagers, led by Chipo, who had raised a small army to save Akina. Panic surged through him. No one could see him here, not like this. Without a second thought, he turned and ran, his heart heavy with regret. He had come so close, yet once again, circumstances had kept him from Akina. As he sprinted back toward the river, a thought rang in his mind. Perhaps the gods are keeping us apart for a reason. Kosana replayed the riddle in his head. "Not alive, but I can grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, and yet I drown." It seemed deceptively simple, yet the answer eluded him. He glanced at Jabali and Zuberi, hoping for a spark of insight. They were equally perplexed. The law allowed them 3 attempts, so the 3 men huddled together, whispering urgently as they tried to piece together the answer. The goblin crowd grew restless, their jeers growing louder. "Tick-tock humans," one shouted, pointing a gnarled finger at them. "You're running out of time," another hissed. "They'll fail." "They always fail." "Let me think," Jabali said, his voice steady but strained. "Something that grows but isn't alive? What could that be, a rock? No, that doesn't make sense." He rubbed his temples, his frustration building as he tried to make sense of the riddle. Nkosana shook his head, his voice low and serious. It's more than that. Think about it. It needs air, but it doesn't have lungs. This isn't something you can just see walking around. It's not alive like we are. The men wrestled with the words, repeating the riddle over and over in their heads. I'm not alive, but I can grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, and yet I drown. Zuberi stepped closer, his calm voice trying to steady them. Let's break it down. Not alive, but can grow. What about a tree? He paused, looking to Jabali. A tree isn't alive like animals are, but it grows. It needs air, right? Photosynthesis or whatever they call it. And it drowns if its roots are waterlogged. It fits. Jabali's eyes lit up for a moment. That could be it. A tree! He turned toward Paka, their goblin tormentor, his voice strong. A tree! That's the answer. Paka's grin grew wider, his sharp teeth gleaming. Wrong! He hissed, dragging out the word with glee. The goblin crowd exploded in laughter, banging their fists on the cavern floor. You have 2 chances left, humans, Paka sneered. 2. And then the girl stays with us forever. Naya stood near the throne, watching her father and his companions with wide, tear-filled eyes. The guardian of the forest stood behind them, glowing faintly, her presence calm, but distant. Both Jabali and Zuberi turned to look at her, desperate for any sign of help. Her gaze dropped, and her hands tightened into fists. She wanted to speak, to guide them, but she was bound by the laws of the forest. She could not interfere. Jabali's shoulders sank. She knows, he murmured. I can see it in her eyes. She knows the answer, but she can't say anything. She's forbidden, Zuberi said. The law of the forest won't let her help us. We're on our own. Focus, Nkosana snapped, his voice cutting through the rising despair. We still have 2 chances. We can't give up now. He looked back at Zuberi. Think. What else grows but isn't alive? Zuberi thought hard, his eyes narrowing. A mountain, he said finally. Mountains grow. Volcanic eruptions, tectonic shifts. They add layers, don't they? They change over time. And mountains don't breathe, but they interact with the air. Winds shape them, erode them. And if the seas rise or glaciers cover them, they drown. Jabali nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. That makes sense. It could be a mountain. He turned to Paka, his voice ringing with renewed hope. A mountain. That's our answer. Wrong again, Paka hissed, his grin widening. Your cleverness is feeble. Try again. Paka leaned in closer, his grin stretching impossibly wide. Time is running out, humans, he sneered. Your guardian cannot save you. You're on your own. Zuberi's face lit up suddenly. A shadow, he said, his voice hushed but certain. Think about it. A shadow grows longer or shorter depending on the light. It's not alive, but it changes. It doesn't breathe, but it can't exist without air for light to pass through. And total darkness, like drowning, makes it disappear. I don't think that's it, Kosana said softly. This was their last chance. It had to fit perfectly. Kosana closed his eyes, blocking out the noise. He focused on the riddle's rhythm, its clues coming together. Something that wasn't alive but could grow. Something that needed air but had no lungs. And something that could drown without a mouth. His thoughts wandered to the days he'd spent in the village, tending his garden. He remembered the damp soil after a heavy rain, the delicate shoots that struggled for air in waterlogged ground. His eyes flew open. It's fire, he blurted out, his voice cutting through the din. The crowd fell silent. Even Paka seemed momentarily stunned, his gleeful expression faltering. Fire, he echoed, as though testing the word on his tongue. Kosana stepped forward, his confidence growing. Fire is not alive, but it grows. It has no lungs, but it needs air to survive. And it drowns when you smother it with water. Silence followed. Then, a slow clap echoed through the chamber. It was Uldrok, his lips curling into a grin. Impressive, he rumbled. It seems the human still has a spark of wit after all. The goblin crowd groaned in disappointment, some even hissing in frustration. Paka looked defeated, his pride wounded. But my king, he protested. Surely they... Enough, Paka, Uldrock growled, silencing him with a glare. He turned his piercing eyes to Niala, who stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The riddle was solved, and I am a king of my word. Niala may leave with her father, if she chooses. Niala swallowed hard, her eyes flickering between Uldrock and Kosana. This was the moment she had dreamed of, yet her anger and hurt still lingered. "And what if I choose to stay?" she asked, her voice soft. Uldrock's grin returned, his teeth gleaming in the dim light. "Then you shall remain, a queen among goblins, adored and respected for eternity. The choice is yours, child." Kosana stepped closer, his hands trembling. "Niala, please. I know I failed you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. I've always loved you. Come home. Let me try to make this right." Tears welled in Niala's eyes. She had spent so long building a wall around her heart, but hearing her father's raw sincerity chipped away at it. She looked around the room at the goblins who had become her strange family, and then back at Kosana, who was so clearly broken but trying. Her voice faltered as she struggled to find the words. Finally, she straightened her shoulders and met Uldrock's eyes. "I choose to go home." The goblin crowd erupted into chaos, some booing, others shouting in protest. Uldrock raised his hand, and the room fell silent once more. "So be it," he said. "But know this, Niala. Should you ever wish to return, the gates of the goblin city will always be open to you." With a wave of his hand, a shimmering portal appeared behind them, glowing with an ethereal light. The way home. Kosana reached out to his daughter, his eyes filled with relief and gratitude. Niala hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. Together, they stepped toward the portal with Jabali and Zuberi close behind. The last thing Kosana heard as they crossed the threshold was Paka's voice, low and menacing. "Well played, Kosana. Well played." Then the world blurred, and the goblin city vanished behind them. The pact between Kosana, the traditional healer, and the goblin had been broken, undone by a riddle. And that, my dear tribe, is the end of yet another episode in our series. Did you crack the riddle? If you guessed fire, congratulations, you were spot on. But if you went with tree or mountain, unfortunately, those weren't the correct answers this time. Thank you for all your submissions. They truly inspire and help shape the twists and turns of the story. As we journey further through rivers, forests, and hidden cities, the adventure continues to unfold. Let's meet again next time and dive even deeper into this world we're creating together. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.